Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this final day of iGaming Next, where we're focused on HR and all that means within the gaming industry. My name's Shona ODonnell. I'm going to be moderating the panel today. I'm Head of Strategic Events at Better Collective. And over the last 12 years, I have been responsible for creating and running some of the biggest events across the gaming industry and bringing people from all parts of that industry together to network, connect, and do business. This year has thrown up some incredible challenges for everyone, but most especially for the HR department. Challenges that I don't think any of us would ever have foreseen, no matter how much scenario planning we've done around things that may or may not happen. HR is probably a very undervalued part of any business. The HR team are always there in the background working to make sure that your health and well-being is well taken care of, but you probably don't think about them very much unless you have a real issue or a need to go to them. And this year, HR really has been forced into the foreground, and they have become the superstars of the business that have kept us all going and really made sure that we are keeping well when wellness has become something of a real focus. I think generally is becoming more important, but especially during a global pandemic. So today on the panel, we're going to be talking about travel policies at work. What's changed? What do you as a manager in any team or specifically in an HR team need to think about? And beyond that, we're going to look at some ways how you can continue to share your company culture and make sure that teams stay strong and connected while we are working together but physically apart. So first of all, I am delighted to have two real powerhouses who have I think between us all, we've got almost 60 years worth of experience of managing people, although we all look very young despite that. So first of all, let me introduce Alexia Frendo, who is the lead HR business partner at Kindred Group. And she's been there for over 15 years, working her way up and, bringing her expertise in the sector with her. She's very passionate about HR, which is what you really want with somebody in a role that takes care of people. And she's managed to remain that positive and passionate about it, despite how challenging things have been for the last, almost a year now. She's based in Malta, and COVID has really given her a chance to improve her work-life balance, which has meant for her spending more time with her two beautiful daughters and practicing her yoga. Thank you very much, Alexia, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And my other panelist is Laura Probert, who's returning to gaming after 5 years out at WPP. She is the incoming Chief People Officer at Scientific Games. She's got over 25 years of experience specialising in diversity, inclusion, and people performance. She's a single mum of Sophia, who's now 17, and her love of the new has meant that lockdown's been a really good opportunity to reflect on what works for her and her teams, both professionally and personally. And we will try and touch on some of the positives of lockdown during this panel. So thank you both very much for joining me. As it's an HR day, and I think it's a good human thing to do. How are you both?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah, I feel good. Really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it will be a really interesting session. I'm excited about what we'll talk about. So we've said this year has thrown up challenges that none of us would have anticipated, and one of those is travel. I know that, as an industry, we travel fairly extensively. There's events all around the world, and probably at any given point, you would have multiple people from your business traveling to multiple different locations. And that's not just around events. Now, it's fair to say that travel has pretty much ground to a halt. I would say that in a normal month, for example, I would travel at least once, maybe twice. So let's take a look at what travel looks like now in the business. Laura, what is the policy at Scientific Games and what's changed for you in the last 8 months?
Yeah, well, I think very similar to other organizations. I think travel was kind of frozen initially and then only really when absolutely business critical. And I think it's really important to note that only if an employee is up for that. This is not about forcing people to travel somewhere because it's business critical. It has to be the choice of the employee. But actually, it's been very, very minimal. It has to be said. But I would say that actually it's a time for reflecting on what we used to do and what we do now and what's necessary. Travel, just we found ways of getting around that and still achieving the outcome that we need to achieve without traveling.
Yeah, and I think that's important, and we'll come on to that, is actually thinking about what is the outcome, not necessarily the method of getting to the outcome. Alexia, what's happening at Kindred in terms of travel?
Yeah, mainly it's the same. Travel has been banned as from the middle of March of this year. And obviously, because employee health and well-being remains our number one priority at the moment. Of course, we are reviewing the policy that we had, the travel policy that we had before. But at the moment, travel is banned for everyone.
And I know in both situations travel is banned. Have you had anyone traveling at all?
Yeah, we have, but only very senior people, and it's been their choice to do so. So very minimal, I would say, but yes, we have.
Yeah,
And
same for us.
yeah, I mean, I know I've travelled twice to Denmark on a real had to go and do something. We're obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, Better Collective are headquartered in Copenhagen. So that was kind of, in the last, not the last 8 months, but the 12 months prior to that, that was kind of my second home. So yeah, it's been very different not flying all the time. I know one of the things we spoke about when we chatted last week, planning the panel, is things are changing so quickly. So it's actually quite hard as an HR professional to put together a policy, because you create a policy and then things change and then you have to start all over again. We spoke a lot about the need to be flexible, and Laura, you touched on that in terms of how people feel about travel. Do you want to talk a bit more about the importance of flexibility and creating policies that work both for the business and for employees?
Yeah, I mean, literally the situations are changing day by day, week by week. And then if you're in a global role, you've got all these different countries with all slightly different changes, different lockdowns, different rules, and so on. So I think it's really important to, trust people to make the right decision. And flexibility really means autonomy and people taking those decisions into their own hands, because they're the expert on what's happening in Italy or in Spain or wherever else, and it's not appropriate to be prescriptive. No one size fits all at the moment, and it's ever changing. So I think it's really important to place more emphasis on leadership as well. That's something that's a big theme at the moment, is trusting leaders to lead in the right way and make the right decisions for their people wherever they are. So that's what I think the flexibility boils down to, is empowerment and leadership.
That's interesting. And have either of you implemented anything around leadership to help the leaders we've got in place? Because leadership is, a lot of people believe it's just a skill that you have, but actually that's really not true. Leadership is something that can be learned and honed. What tools are you giving the leaders in your business to enable them to, I guess, to make the right decisions for their people?
Yeah, so obviously I don't start my SGD role until Monday, so obviously I haven't implemented anything there. But in my current role, actually, these things should have already been in place, because leaders have already been managing people remotely. Okay, this is an extreme situation, but exactly the same leadership principles apply regardless of COVID. So I think the key theme is around empowerment and the business giving leaders permission to do the right thing. And if they are, the right people in those roles, they just need the permission to do that. And we have like e-learning modules around managing virtually and managing people remotely. We have, great leadership programs. So it's really kind of dialing up the things that they should already know and have been trained in, because COVID is, it's extreme, but there's lots of situations where leaders need to kind of, suddenly adjust to a new world, and those principles apply pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Alexia, what advice would you give to someone, whether that be specifically within an HR role or, just a manager generally, and how they should adapt their policy and what things they need to think about when they're creating a new policy around travel?
Yeah. Personally, I think that a good policy is one where you can easily adapt to changes when needed, both changes internally and externally. And that's where flexibility comes in as well. As I said before, I think well-being and security of our employees should be at the forefront. Whoever knows me knows how obsessed I am also with employee experience. And now I think also the terminology of providing a travel experience is in as well. I think the term that we use in HR, that we have a duty of care towards the employee, I think it has never been as important as it is now. So all these terminologies come into play as well. And I think it is an opportunity as well to change our mentality and also shift maybe the budgets on where is going to be our focus. Is our focus going to be travel only, or shall we adapt and also assess thoroughly the need versus the want? Shall we shift some of our budget from travel to technology and create a solid platform in there? It will also be good for our cost. I think it's good for our environment as well, because we have to report on the CO2 emissions as well. So that is important to take care. And I think personally, by doing this, we would gain quality time, both quality time with our loved ones, but also precious time at work as well, because we would avoid unnecessary travel. So this is all the things that I would advise to businesses, and what we're going through as well personally. So
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's interesting about, we've got more time because we've got less travel time. I think that touches on an important wellness point of making sure that people aren't necessarily spending that commute time just working. Because I know for a lot of people, actually, their commute, particularly people with families, their commute can be their only time that they have to themselves. So it's about thinking about what you can do to make sure, I think, you have some delineation between work. And actually, I run a virtual supper club, or I did run a virtual supper club for all of lockdown one in the UK. And we had a revisit last night for the first time as we're back in lockdown. And one of the things that one of our guests said is, it's not that we're working from home, it's that we're living at work. And I think that's we obviously didn't talk about this because this only happened last night, but I'm like, that's such a good way to think about it, and to try and flip it so that that's not the case. What do you think that you'll see implement once things, I guess, are a little bit more settled and we know what's happening? Obviously, we've had some fantastic potential news, trying not to get too excited, about the Pfizer vaccine, and they're talking about that being ready as early as December, which, would really change things for us and for traveling. Do you think you'll see things like implementing more stringent business cases for travel? Will there be less travel, but people will be allowed to book perhaps a higher class of travel to make it safe? What do you think you'll see things like that come into the business once we're in a position to make some more solid decisions?
Yeah, for us, I think it's definitely more investment in technology, definitely more security controls, not necessarily business class, but more security controls with a unique platform, a shared platform, whereby maybe travelers can receive SMSs or notifications on time. And I think, as I mentioned before, thorough analysis for the needs versus the wants. And also, if I may, something that this COVID has taught me: before I used to only see the employee, now I'm seeing the employee and his or her immediate family, because it could be that the immediate family has someone vulnerable, so it would automatically reflect on the needs of the employees. So
yeah, I agree with that. I think it's almost like a risk assessment, isn't it?
yeah.
You know, if somebody has, as you say, an elderly relative or parent at risk, and it would put their family at risk by traveling, of course you wouldn't enforce that. You would have to find a different way forward. So I think there's definitely a case by case basis, and it goes back to that kind of leadership point again. That, you know, some leaders have, you know, maybe younger, single, employees that, you know, it's not, they don't feel so much of an issue. They might have somebody who's a single parent, or somebody, as I say, who's got family who may be at risk, who may be living in the same home as them. So you have to take it, I think, on a case by case basis, which is why a policy is quite a hard, rigid word to use when it comes to a situation that's ever changing and very different by person.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as well. I think it's one of the things we're going to come on to talk about, kind of culture. But I think generally, around all things in work, we're seeing that while it's good to have a policy that kind of covers you, actually millennials and Gen Z are changing the way we work and the way we think, and things aren't so fixed across everything because people are more confident, I think, in saying this might be the policy, but it doesn't work for me, and here's why, and really forcing us to think about why we have things in place, because if it doesn't work, why are we doing it? One of the things, we've spoken, we're here because we're at an event, and obviously, it's really nice to be able to interact and see people, because I think that's one of the things we've missed. But business travel obviously isn't just about events. You're both managing functions at global businesses, and you've got teams working across countries and interacting and working on projects that take them across the globe to work with other teams and to implement processes and policies. When I started at Better Collective, although I'm based in London, my first day at work was actually in Copenhagen. And as I said, normally I would be in the Copenhagen office, because while I'm physically in London, actually my team and everyone I work with is not in London. So that's obviously happening lots around the world. We're seeing lots of people who are not kind of at their home office in terms of where they're normally based. What advice can you offer to managers who are looking to onboard new hires? Because one of the really positive things, I think within our industry is we are seeing that there is growth, there is still recruitment happening, and that's really positive. How would you, Laura, suggest that people can onboard new hires when they can't physically meet the team that they're going to be working with in most of the world for now anyway?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's not an easy thing. It's a weird. I'm starting a job where I'm not walking in on the first day on Monday and seeing the office and getting a feel for the atmosphere and the kind of vibe in the organization. So that's really strange. I'm going to be sat in the same seat that I'm sitting in now, but in a different company. So nothing's kind of changed in a way. So it's really important for me, it's really important to get lots of contact with that person, but certainly initially. And the way that I've been working with my new team is having very, very regular video calls, short to the point, but keeping that regular contact, almost like copying the seeing somebody around the office kind of feel. And then we've been doing lots of WhatsApps, but I like to use voice message because it's more human. And also it saves me typing loads, which is boring. So I'll do a quick, it's never quick, actually. I usually ramble on for about 5 minutes, but send a voice message to somebody and then get them to voice message me back. So I'm actually hearing them, they're hearing me. It's more human. I think that's the thing that we need to build into our day-to-day is the human element. If it's all email, you're not going to engage with that person properly. And actually, I think whereas before, if you were in an office, you might have a weekly one-to-one catch-up because you see them in the kitchen or making a coffee. You don't feel like you have to meet all the time. I would say regular stand-ups are great, 15 minutes in the morning. Everyone sees each other. Everyone gets a chance to kind of engage and interact. and then they kind of get on with their day, they've had their little fix of human contact, even though it's remote. I think it's just changing the way you communicate.
Alexia?
No, same for us. I echo what was said. Something maybe to add is I think that especially for new employees as well, it's important to set up a network for them so that they know when and how to contact employees. I think that the buddy system works as well because it might be that the manager will not be there all the time, but the buddy, one of his tasks and role would be to assist the new employee. So I think it's really important to have this network close, especially to the new employee.
I think the buddy idea is actually really important, because that's beyond just this is your manager, this is HR, this is finance. This is, if you have a problem, go here. Whereas it's like, here is someone who will, you can't force a friendship, but here's someone who will be your friend. And if you've got a question that you're like, I don't know if I should ask this. Should I ask this? You've got someone who's, who's a peer, and you can just have a chat with. And I think that's one of the things we're all missing, is just that kind of like ability to offload. And Laura, you're saying how important it is to see people. I think certainly, in England, we're in lockdown 2. And during the first lockdown, there was a lot of Zooms and chats. And then I think we came out of lockdown, but actually things didn't massively change. We were still effectively in lockdown. And then we stopped seeing each other. And actually this week I've had quite a lot of Zoom calls, so like face-to-face calls as opposed to phone calls. And one of them was with my manager. And normally we would just chat on the phone. He's like, oh, it's really nice to actually see you. And I was like, it's really nice to see you. And I think sometimes you get so like bogged down with just getting through the day, and it is, it's a challenge for all of us, this new normal. You forget actually the importance of being able to look in somebody's eyes and just see them. It makes a huge difference. And I caught a little bit of the first session this morning from the TEDx guy, and it's something I haven't thought about for a long time, but it comes back to this old thing, is actually most of what we say comes from our body language.
Yeah.
And I think especially when you're working in cross-cultural teams, that is so important, because culturally we're all quite different. And if you've got people from different cultures, sometimes the Danes are very straight to the point. I mean, and I'm Scottish, so actually sometimes I'm quite straight to the point, but I think in a slightly different way. So being able to see each other makes such a difference. So that's like something I've really taken on board this week as well.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. And then we were talking, about like flexibility and about millennials and Gen Z. And I think people forget that millennials now are over 30. They're not kids. And one of the things that we will have seen, and I know when we spoke about this, you've both really seen it coming through, is with both of these generations, they're really looking at who they want to work for in terms of what is that company's culture, what is their ethos. They want to make sure that they're working at somewhere they're proud to say they work for. It's not just about remuneration and their own development. They want to work for a company that's doing the right thing. How are you working with teams to share that company culture? Because that's quite hard to share. Like, Laura, you're saying, when you go into the office or not into the office on Monday, how do you absorb that culture? How do you share that without physically being in the same place?
I think the culture's changed inevitably. So you think of companies like Facebook and Google, where it's free food and the foosball table and everyone going for drinks after work. That's all gone. And I think a lot of organizations are struggling to redefine what that culture is and to create that sense of fun. What fun is one of our SGD's values. And so we've really scratched our heads over how do we inject fun when we're all sat in our houses, not seeing each other. What does fun mean now? And so I did some calls with people and talked to some of the managers about, does it mean we all go online and have like some kind of competition? Because we're in gaming, maybe we could play games together. And then you'd have some people going, well, I'm not really into that. Or, I like to do this or that. there was no one size fits all. And so again, it went back to that, right, leaders, you know what turns your teams on and what doesn't. And so there's these microcosms now of culture. And we really have to think hard about what culture is. I think learning is really important. We know that empowerment, mastery, and purpose are the kind of three motivators for employees. So ensuring that learning is online or on video conference, and that people can really develop, because they've got a bit more time now to spend maybe on a training course or qualifying in something, getting qualifications. So for me, the culture has changed, and it's not about those kind of tangible things that you could touch and feel and see before. Now there's something more virtual and different, and I don't think many organizations have nailed that yet.
No, I don't think so. Alexia?
No, I perfectly agree. And I was smiling because she said fun. Well, in inverted commas, now it is fun because, for example, our offices are still open. So our employees have to assess whether they want to work from home or from the office. And I sometimes come in the office, and one day I came on a Friday, and usually we had Friday drinks. And then now I realized that on Friday, the drinks are served at our desks. So case in point taken, I will be coming in the office on Friday. But again, it's not the fun that we were used to, going in the hub and meet and greet everyone. Now everything is done at our desks. So that's the limitation of fun. But yes, we also try to keep our company culture alive, also thanks to our offices as well. Thanks that we can still have our offices open and can still sort of experiment with some stuff. For example, for Halloween, we did free lunch Halloween team, so everyone could come. Obviously, we keep our spaces and we keep our distances, but yes, at least we can keep our culture alive in inverted commas.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm mindful of time, so we have like 3 minutes, and I have a couple of questions. So, what do you think are the positives? Because I think we need situations like this. I know that might sound bizarre, but it takes sometimes great tragic changes and to make us think about how we live and actually what is important. And I think that there's always something to take from everything. Everything teaches you a lesson. What are the positives that you've seen come out of the changes to how we work? And what of those changes do you think are here to stay? Alexia, if I start with you.
Yeah, I'll be very short. And I think that during this past 8 months, it was proved that we can work remotely, although we shouldn't neglect the importance of collaborating together, of meeting. And for sure, we will adopt a blended approach post-COVID. So we will work some days from the office and some days from home. And thanks to this, I think we will gain more quality time as well with our family. So this is something that we will be adopting post-COVID.
All right.
I think for me, it's about finding your own rhythm, because the rhythm that was there imposed upon us, which was a commute into an office and all the kind of rituals around that, have gone. We've got an opportunity to find what our rhythm, our personal rhythm is. And I've noticed that when I'm talking to people on calls, that so-and-so said, I managed to get time to ride my horse, or I managed to get time to do a run, or I'm doing, as you say, this kind of virtual supper in the evening, or people they're listening to their own rhythm of what enables them to work to their optimum, to be happier, and so on. And so we never got that chance before. We'd have it all laid out for us. And now that kind of structure has gone. But that's, for me, a great opportunity to apply our own structure routine that works really well for us as individuals. I think that's a great opportunity.
Fantastic. I've got a minute left. I've got one quick question, which is, how do you motivate people to stay productive when they're in lockdown?
For me, it's communication about what's happening, keeping people engaged in the journey that we're all on. And actually, the communication levels have gone through the roof at SGD because these senior execs aren't traveling all the time. They're actually having proper town halls and calls and community get-togethers which they weren't able to do before. And people have absolutely loved that because they have the visibility, way more visibility, weirdly, now than they did before, even though you think, oh, well, you have visibility because you're in an office. Now those communications are global and they go out to everybody and they're much more regular and consistent. And I think that's keeping people much more connected with what's going on.
Yeah, and I would add also that leaders have developed certain awareness as well that before, although they were seeing, they didn't have the full picture. So I would add that as well to communication.
Yeah, I agree. I think, interestingly, it's an opportunity where we have the ability to actually deconstruct everything we know about how we work. And I think that will take really strong, talented, and brave leaders and HR leaders to allow us to deconstruct what we know, because that's obviously quite frightening to take apart what we know and to really think about what do we need in terms of structure and what can we get rid of that doesn't work for us, and empower people to work in the best possible way that they can do to deliver our goals. So coming back to what we spoke about right at the start, what's the goal, what's the outcome, and how do people best do that? Because we don't need to give them false constructs that we've had for years and years. We just need them to deliver in the best possible way for them and for us as businesses. And on that note, we will wrap up. Thank you both for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I hope that everyone has got some valuable insights. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.